People of color look at the police question in one way. People who are not of color in this country look at it in a completely different way. And there is a perception that on one hand, on one side, people need to behave better so they won't get shot by the police. And on the other side of this spectrum, people say, listen, no matter what I do, the police are after me. Right. And so who's right in this? I mean, what's going on?
It doesn't matter who's right. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. At this point, is how do you solve the problem? It's like being on the Titanic and it's going down, and all of a sudden we start arguing about, okay, so who put a hole in the vessel? I don't care at that point.
That's a good point.
The other gross analogy I use is, I heard Talib Kweli use it one time. It's like being on a slave ship and we arguing about who got the fattest chain. This is not the time.
Sure.
I mean, people need to understand this is so urgent. This is so urgent, and that's why I said I think you take a multi-dimensional approach. If in your community in Inglewood or Arbor Gresham or Woodlawn, you want to practice community policing and say what it looked like, go for it. Figure out a way to make it happen. I mean, it's that serious. But I think it brings back, when you were talking about segregation, I'm wondering if that's where the conversation about community policing really comes in to help alleviate some of that pressure.
Okay, so community policing, is that the solution? Now, I've read that community policing may not be the solution because what it does is it further puts more police officers, gives a further military culture, if you will, into communities that are already dealing with a lot of policing.
Where they feel like they're already an occupied force. And there's just more police officers there. But I think there's room for multiple solutions. Community policing might be part of it. I think accountability. There's not very much accountability. If officers know that they will be held accountable, that prosecutors will be able to indict them, that makes a difference too. I mean, there's many things. Community policing, it's accountability, it's of having a police force that looks like the population that it's sworn to protect. I mean, that's what we could look at Baltimore, we could look at Ferguson, we could look at the area of Cleveland, and we see through the history of the racial demographics of those areas where they changed. These were originally white flight areas, right? So when white flight was happening in the 1950s, 1960s, whites moved to places like Ferguson. And as we see a demographic inversion happening now, we see further white flight from these particular inner ring suburbs. And they're now predominantly dominated by minority populations, but they still have the structures and the institutions and the police officers of a white suburban community.
Well, you talked about accountability. Can we say that we are holding police officers more accountable now than we did even 15, 20 years ago? Because I just read about this case in New York that just broke, where this gentleman, this police officer, shot and killed someone in the stairwell. He didn't know sort of who they were.
Oh yeah, shot into the dark.
Yes, and he was indicted for manslaughter charges and police misconduct. So this is starting to happen. Now here's a reality, and I would say this, being a person of color, I know that there's a perception that there really is no justice on these things. Well,
is
that
ready?
change? Okay, come on, Sam.
When the alderman came on and they played, we didn't know anything, I didn't know, I was like, oh, how could you not know? Because the Committee of Finance always meets on Monday, sir. And at the Committee of Finance is where they agreed to make those settlement agreements.
Sure.
I don't know how Laquan slipped under the radar. I believe, if I read the transcript correctly, it was also the same day that they did the settlement for Burge case. So the idea of police and brutality, that was on everyone's lips. I think it was business as usual.
And there's millions that were paid out for Burge, as you correctly mentioned, in the 1970s and 1980s. And you're right, just this last decade, over $500 million paid out in these cases. And this is, my personal policy, is think about that $500 million that we've spent in the past decade. That could have saved schools. That could have kept mental health clinics open. Think about the waste.
And now introducing our special musical guest, Chicago-based and Nigerian-born artist Ekeng Bassey, with his hit, Wonderland.
Nobody to stop my shine, nobody to end my story. I'ma be that hero, I'ma be that hero. Hey. Now then they gonna say, I awesome and not no ordinary picking, and not no ordinary picking. Hey, if them ask you where I'd be, tell them I'm off to Wonderland. Don't know when I'll be back. Seems like I'm never coming back. Sometimes a yes He feels like it is a waste of time, but I know that I'm on my way to Wonderland. Wonder, wonder, I'm on my way to Wonderland. Wonder, I wonder, I'm on my way to something better. Wonder, I wonder, there are beautiful people. I wonder, I'm on my way to Wonderland. Woo! I'm on my way to something better, better. I'm on my way to Wonderland. Oh my, it's a beautiful city. It's a beautiful city.